For part 2 of the 3 types of Muay Boran techniques, we'll be focusing on the agility / athletic / performance techniques. Now let's talk about what we consider the agility techniques. And these are the techniques that are considered the most controversial because it really divides the people who do Muay Boran, even the teachers themselves. Because as I mentioned earlier, Muay Boran is not just one system, it's all the different fighting styles that existed in Thailand. So you'll have different teachers, different emphasis, and some of them are just not interested in jumping, climbing on someone. Maybe they're just interested in blocking, kicking, and so on. There's going to be all types of arguments as to why these moves are useless or they're just for performance and so on. That's fine, everybody has their own opinion. But for us, we like these techniques because they work on your agility, your reflexes. It makes you comfortable jumping on someone, climbing on someone, not worried about falling, rolling, and so on. It just makes you more athletic. And it just gives you that edge in terms of being comfortable doing these moves that a lot of normal martial artists may not know. It's always good to have that edge, especially when everyone is doing the same thing. And it's not necessarily a move that you're gonna do from the get-go. The point is being more athletic, having more agility and better reflexes is always an advantage compared to someone who doesn't have those types of techniques. Another thing is, when you think about Muay Boran today, a lot of what you see out there has to do with the performance techniques, especially in Thailand. You'll see a lot of the jumping, climbing moves, they'll do it in performances, festivals, even before a Muay Thai fight and so on. And that's why people have this notion, people who don't know have this notion that, oh, this is what Muay Boran is all about. It's all about the performances and this and that. But that's really not the case. There's definitely a high percentage of Muay Boran practitioners who do the agility / performance techniques. But that doesn't mean Muay Boran is all about just performance. It just means these individuals or these practitioners prefer doing these moves when they're doing shows, when they're doing performances. And there's nothing wrong with that. Many of the traditional martial arts systems will have techniques that are for agility or for performance purposes. And it doesn't mean that most of their techniques are just for show. It just means that there's a category for that. Just because a lot of the Muay Boran practitioners do the climbing and jumping moves, it doesn't mean every Muay Boran stylist does that. Obviously for us, we do everything, right? We do the self-defense, we do the jumping, climbing, but we also have a great deal more of the sport / major techniques. And so a martial arts system that has fancier moves that are not necessarily something that we'd use in a straight up self-defense or even sport environment doesn't invalidate the whole system itself. It just means that there are other moves that we have here. You can use those moves, but you don't have to do them. So having these agility / performance techniques is just an added bonus. It's not something you have to learn. Not all my students learn the climbing and jumping moves. In fact, most of them don't even want to do them. That's fine. It just depends on the individual. But because climbing and jumping is part of the techniques that we offer, we make it available to our students, and then they can decide whether these are techniques that they want to learn. But it's optional. It's never forced. We never say, look, you need to do this so that you could be better Muay Boran stylist. No. It depends on the individual. Like I said, they can choose whichever techniques work best for them. But there are also the intangibles that are not so easily seen from the outside unless you actually practice these moves. And some of those would include not being afraid of jumping or climbing or even rolling. And this is important when you're worried about what's going to happen if you do this technique or react a certain way. Are you going to stop yourself from taking chances, from trying to go for it? And so it's just a split-second decision, which could sometimes be the difference between winning and losing. Of course, it may not be such a big deal when it's just basic self-defense, like we mentioned in part 1, because the basic self-defense is more for average individuals who just want to do like a simple, basic self-defense technique from the get-go. But when you're competing, you're performing, you might want that extra edge in terms of just being comfortable in certain situations where you have to take more chances, whether you're jumping, climbing, falling, rolling, and so on. So eliminating that block in your head, that fear of taking chances, is an intangible that is really difficult to measure. But it's definitely a benefit when you're working on these types of techniques. Another intangible is just having that open mind when it comes to learning techniques. Because when you do things that are not normal, out of the ordinary, then you begin to take chances and you begin to think of different ways to approach a move. Even though it's unrealistic in terms of practicality, just because you're doing moves that are unorthodox and unconventional, it opens you up to the possibilities of what else can come out of it in terms of, oh, I could approach a move this way, I can use this combination with that, or I can roll and then go back into the situation and so on. When you do a lot of climbing, a lot of jumping, and moves that you normally don't do in a practical situation, it just opens you up to the possibilities. It's not necessarily a literal translation of the technique when it comes to self-defense, because you're going to have critics out there who they're going to tell you you shouldn't waste your time doing these moves for whatever reasons they come up with, right? The bottom line is most of the critics that say don't do these moves are the ones who can't do them themselves, because it all depends on what your purpose is, right? Again, if your purpose is to perform better and have better aesthetics, yeah, definitely you can do some of these fancy moves. But if you want to apply some of this in combat, like sport and so on, then obviously it has to be more practical. And it doesn't mean the whole move is ineffective just because it's so fancy. You can still get ideas from it if you open your mind. And that's what these moves do. They open you up to the possibilities of how you can do a move, whether it's something that seems improbable. But if it throws off your opponent and they don't see it coming, it can work. Sometimes we get caught up in just doing basic things, direct things that we think, oh, this is an efficient way of doing moves. And definitely, I always recommend working on the fundamentals. But once in a while, you can throw off your opponent by doing a move that they don't expect. So these intangibles are benefits that you just can't measure outright, but can definitely help in terms of upping your game, whether it's for performance or sport training. Don't think of them in black and white or in terms of effective or not effective. Think of them as extracurricular techniques that can enhance your athleticism or open you up to a different way of thinking in terms of having a different avenue with certain techniques, certain combinations, certain chaining of moves, and so on. Just make sure that these agility/performance techniques don't take over your whole curriculum in terms of Muay Boran skills. Because then if that happens, it's going to be mostly performance oriented. And that's not really the goal in terms of adding this to the whole martial arts system. It's really just an extra way to add to your skills. That's how you want to think about these techniques. It's sort of like the icing on the cake. Don't ever let anyone tell you what you can or cannot do, what's effective or not effective for you. Base it on your own rigorous training to figure out what types of techniques work best for you. It's always good to have an open mind instead of a narrow-minded approach to things. That way you don't limit yourself. That way you can open yourself to the possibilities of adding certain techniques or certain aspects of techniques, even if they're just for agility or for athleticism and so on. But either way, it's always good to be open-minded and be unlimited in terms of learning. So that's going to do it for part 2. In part 3, we're going to get into the skills techniques, which is the bulk of the Muay Boran curriculum, which is, of course, the minor and the major techniques of becoming proficient in Muay Boran itself.